Hey folks, Matthew here once again. Today I would like to talk to you about a game called The Dead Linger, which is by Sandswept Studios. It was a game that I backed on Kickstarter back in 2012, and it was pitched as a first-person zombie survival game, raising a total of $155,000 out of the original $60,000 goal. If I can quote the original Kickstarter page, The Dead Linger is an FPS that embodies the gaming community's hunger for a true, open-world zombie apocalypse survival sandbox. So the intention was that in The Dead Linger, the zombies would be the main threat, as opposed to something like DayZ, where the zombies are more of an annoyance / loot guarding mechanic, and it is the other players you have to watch out for. In The Dead Linger, while the other players are still a threat, the zombies are the main threat, and will keep tracking you down, and if you don't pay attention they can very easily overwhelm you. Which did happen to me a few times in the alpha. So I followed this game quite a bit early on during its development, but my interest waned as the updates did basically. The updates became less and less frequent, and I didn't think much about it until I was recently checking the status of my crowdfunded games, and noted a blog post from the project lead Geoff Keene called The Final Word, which says that the game is, quote, postponed indefinitely, which is video game developer euphemism for cancelled effectively. The blog post attributes this to funding issues. The game didn't take off as much as they'd expected, there was a few engine changes which were expensive, and there was a few issues with various staff members. If I can quote the blog post directly, quote, "When these few staff members' very short contracts with Sandswept ended, they began to spread extremely negative and completely false allegations about where the funds had gone, as well as some strange things about my personality or work habits. I have no idea what these allegations are, or if there is any truth to them. I'm going to assume not, because benefit of the doubt. But the damage was done, and crowdfunding unfortunately can be a very fickle mistress. It can allow you for some great creative freedom, allowing you to create the game of your dreams. But if you don't capture people's imagination, then you're left up a creek without a paddle, unfortunately. So what you are seeing now, me playing, is the current and, short of a miracle, the final version of the game. This is the first version of the game that was released on the Unreal Engine, which was Alpha 15, I believe. It's not great, it's buggy, there's some unfinished assets about the place. I'm sure you'll see one or two of them come up as I play through the map. In versions of the alpha prior to this, the game started out in the Ogre 3D engine, which was a very Spartan engine. The assets didn't seem particularly detailed, and there wasn't much logical placement to it, and object placement was somewhat Spartan in the general sense. Objects were few and far between. This was improved somewhat by the switch to Unity. Well, I feel it was an improvement. I thought the assets looked better, felt more real, for lack of a better term, and a little better in the placement. But evidently that wasn't what they were after, so they've tried the Unreal Engine, and this is what we have now. It feels a lot busier, but actually the environments are still quite empty, so there isn't an awful lot to do, and as I said, there's some bugs, some of the assets are unfinished, and so forth. So overall, I'm quite sad that this is where the game is ending. I felt that the previous version had more to it. It better encapsulated the idea of the game. There was some more mobs and things, I think there was some wildlife. The crafting system that was in place was very bare bones, but it had a lot of potential. They seem to be going for a very strong foundation upon which they can build other things, lots of different recipes and so forth. Instead, what we're left with is a relatively small Spartan map, which is somewhat buggy and incomplete, and no crafting system, and a limited range of not that interesting zombies. So overall, I'm a little bit disappointed that this is the version that will, quote, go down in history, as it were. In regards to the funding, I'm willing to give Geoff and the other people at Sandswept the benefit of the doubt. I'm happy to assume that there wasn't any foul play going on. The fact that they changed the engine twice suggests that they made bad decisions fairly early on, but I'm happy that that was just a bad choice on the part of the developers rather than part of some grander conspiracy to waste backer money. So I'm happy that they did what they could with the money that they had. I don't bear any ill will towards Geoff or the other people at Sandswept. The project just didn't pan out as they'd hoped, which happens in video games, it's just a fact of life. There's discussion in the blog post about possibly continuing the game's development, and I guess for that they would need a big external investor or multiple external investors. They could go to the community for help, but if they did that, it would cause quite a lot of ill will because, you know, all the money's already been pumped into it from the community, so without any strong evidence of progress, it wouldn't be looked on very highly by an investor, let alone the harsh world that is the internet community. The blog post also discusses the idea that if the people at Sandswept do choose to abandon the Dead Linger completely, of releasing the source code and art assets, and I'm hoping that they'll do this, although the project has quote-unquote failed as it currently stands. If they've got a strong enough community, I think that a few enthusiastic people could probably pick up the slack and turn this into the product it was always intended to be, or at least something close to it. Especially as the blog post mentions that they have a lot of art assets they themselves haven't used yet, and I do recall way back when that they used to do community spotlights on community generated art assets, so I would not be surprised at all if the community is already there waiting to pick up the slack. So I'm hoping that they'll do that. If the people at Sandswept choose not to continue on with the Dead Linger, they will move on to a new project under the Sandswept name. It was suggested in the blog post that one of Geoff's friends suggested closing down the company, Sandswept Studios, and starting a new one to try and distance themselves from the Dead Linger and everything that's happened. But Geoff has said that he's not doing this, that he wants to own his mistakes, and I applaud that sentiment. Owning your mistakes and moving on from them is an important part of development, and I wish them well in their future projects. As I said, I don't think they were deliberately trying to waste our time, so I will be keeping an eye out for their next product. I won't be running out to buy it, I must admit, but if it turns out to be something that interests me, I'm perfectly willing to give it a shot. So that's really all I wanted to say. It's disappointing that the game isn't going to be finished, but I didn't want to just leave it to fade into the background. I wanted to say something anyway. My original intention was to do a beta impressions video for this game, as I've crowdfunded it, but as it'll never likely get that far, I'm happy just to put this here and move on from that. As it stands, the version of the alpha that we've been left with cannot be recommended. It's too Spartan and bare bones to be a viable way to spend your time. If you do want zombie survival, DayZ is probably your best option, although many others are available. That's just the one that comes to mind first and foremost, mostly because everybody's heard of it already. State of Decay is also pretty good, so that gets a recommendation from me. Anyway, that's enough recommendations. Thanks for watching. I've been Matthew. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe. If you're interested in keeping appraised of what I'm up to generally, you can follow me at neo_venator on Twitter. If you want to find out more about the Dead Linger, you can go to their website, thedeadlinger.com. The blog post says that the alpha was to remain on Steam at a discounted price of $5, but I've had a look and it seems to have been taken down at this point. I don't know if it'll come back or not, but as I cannot recommend it as a game anyway, it's probably best to just leave it well enough alone. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks again for watching, and I shall see you next time.